Përshëndetje dhe mirë se erdhët në program. Me ardhjen e presidentit Donald Trump në pushtet, politika globale ka ndryshuar, por edhe qasja e tij edhe ndaj aleatëve, por edhe ndaj reformave që bëhen brenda administratës së SBA-ve, të cilat pastaj të gjitha ngjallen një interes të madh. Thuajse çdo ditë deklaratat, vendimet, por edhe zhvillimet që krijohen nga shtëpia e bardhë janë lajme të para globale. Por si duhet parë kjo lloj politike që duket të jetë ndryshme nga ajo që më parë vinte nga Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës? Çfarë ndodh brenda Shteteve të Bashkuara të Amerikës? Sa arrihet të shihet këtu jashtë se çfarë ndodh brenda ose cila është jeta reale në Amerikë? Sot në një intervistë të rrallë do të flasim për këto çështje me Henry Thomas Jones, ish drejtor i Institutit Republikan për Evropën Qendrore dhe Lindore, njohës i mirë i politikës në rajon, sidomos në vitet e pas luftrave në ish Jugosllavi. Sot ai është zyrtar shtetëror në shtetin e Arkansasit, si dhe ekspert komunikimi dhe avokatie. Një republikan pikërisht i gjeneratës së presidentit Trump. Dhe ai është këtu në studio. Thank you very much for being part of this program.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
I was just explaining who you are and why we are doing this program. The interview will be in English. And of course, we're going to discuss about inner politics, international politics, but also a little bit about you, because you have strong ties with this country and with the region.
I do. And in fact, those ties are why I'm here right now. I'm a guest of President Ivanov and the Club of Skopje and the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. There was a forum this week, so I just want to be very clear. I'm here as a private citizen under those auspices. I do not work for the United States government. I work for a state government in Arkansas, and I'm here for the forum. But I'm very grateful to be here with you today.
Thank you very much. We will do a short break and we will start immediately with the interview. Një shkëputje dhe rikthehemi me njëherë me intervistën. Na ndiqni. Jemi rikthyer në studio me një intervistë të veçantë, do të kisha thënë, sepse kemi një zyrtar, siç është Henry Thomas Jones, ish drejtori i IRI-t për Evropën Qendrore dhe Lindore, por, si që thash edhe në çeljet e programit, një republikan pikërisht i gjeneratës së presidentit Trump me idenë për të kuptuar se ndoshta çfarë ndodh më shumë në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës. So, Henry Thomas Jones, I will start this interview a little bit to give the audience the possibility to know you better. Because you have been here in this region, especially in problematic time, let's say, or immediately after the wars of ex-Yugoslavia. So, can you explain what were you doing at the time here?
Well, yes, we had the International Republican Institute here in Skopje and then across the region. And in my capacity there, I was able to work with a number of your leaders in the region, and it was a very nice time. I went to the private sector after that and remained working in the region. One of my first clients was President Rugova, one of the most pleasant people I've ever worked with. And I also had the pleasure of working with Arben Jafari, who I think his ideas now are particularly important for looking to the path forward and bringing sort of cooperation back to the region, which seems to be perhaps at risk.
What can you recall about that time? In what sense? I mean, you are back in the region after so many years.
Yeah.
I'm asking you this because maybe we need sometimes a perspective from outside. Has our country changed a lot? What's your perspective?
It has and it hasn't. Some things don't change. And character in people, particularly the hospitality and the kindness and the generosity, that's not changed. Even in the hardest times, I've found that the people here in Southeastern Europe are always very kind and generous and thoughtful. The path towards the European Union, the entry into NATO and Macedonia, those have changed some things. And I think there's been positive progress. I think there was a bit of stagnation previously, and I do believe that things are on the right track, and the focus forward is the way to go.
I want to ask you just another thing, maybe to link that time and now, and I know that you mentioned Rugova, but also you mentioned to me when we were preparing this interview about the gesture that he does.
Yes.
He did
yes.
With a call and how important it is maybe
Yes.
To make it more relevant, because now we are in times of peace.
Yes. One of the biggest problems that Kosovo faced in its early existence was, how do they achieve recognition? Because many states were refusing recognition based on the fact that they asserted that Kosovo was not going to be self-sufficient, that it could not survive on its own as a state. So in response to that, when I was having this conversation with President Rugova, he turned around, and he was known for doing this, but it was a brilliant gesture. And he brings something to me wrapped in a beautiful velvet covering. And he slowly unwraps it in front of me. And he says, "This, my friend, this is how we make it." And it was a rock. But in that rock, it had a little piece of all of the various precious metals and other things that Kosovo has under its soil. The lignite, for example. The things that are valuable and precious. And his plan was to capitalize on that and bring Kosovo up into a place of self-sufficiency. And that was always on his mind. Whenever he met any foreign leaders, anyone he thought he should give the message to, he gave them a rock. So there are people all around the world now that know Kosovo because they know that there's something under the soil that will make that country prosperous.
I mean, I asked you this question because, again, now we want to make this interview more about America as well. But it's nice for people to know that you know a lot of history of this country and all the region. And economy is one of the most important things. And this is what, in a way, drives America right now. I would like to ask you, and maybe to give the opportunity for people to understand what's going in America. But first, since you haven't been here for so long, mm-hmm. and you came right now, and you are coming when President Trump is in the White House, do you think that people here in the region, in Europe, have the real sense of what's going on in USA?
Not at all. And it's become very clear to me in speaking almost with everyone. There's a large filter. This is part of the problem we've had. Our media is very selective in the information that arrives here. And I don't think that many consumers of the social media that was very popular in the United States are consuming the same content. So again, there's a divergence and a gulf in information that's just available. So many opinions and views are formed on information that is, I would say, not accurate.
But let's explain that. Why? Why do you think it's inaccurate? It's a matter of ideology, it's a matter of perception, or we just don't get the information that you think we should get as an audience outside the US?
I think it's all three. Mm-hmm. You're a journalist, you understand that even if you try your hardest to be absolutely fair and balanced, little biases creep in. If you don't try, big biases creep in. We have had a significant problem with media not quite being, fair and balanced, as one might say. And at the same time, there are agendas in play, and particularly when those are filtered through opposition forces, whether they're in business or in our government or elsewhere.
One thing that comes here as an information from United States is the reforms, the big reforms that the
Yes.
administration is going through. How can we explain, or how can you explain, and how can we understand what's going on? For a lot of people, this is a dramatic change in the way U.S. Is going through.
Yeah, it is a dramatic change. I mean, we've had some very hard times, though, and we're coming through this. Our economy has suffered tremendously, and President Trump is doing everything necessary to restore our economic powers and bring prosperity back to the middle class and the lower classes. And I think the best way to understand this is I have 4 children, and one is still a teenager, the others have been teenagers. Sometimes they go away, they're not quite independent. They need help, they need money, they need a credit card. Sometimes parents help them with these things. So just imagine a situation where you have a young daughter, and she's going away, and you give her some money and a credit card, and she starts spending it. And that's normal, and they sometimes do a little extra. And then she says she has a friend who needs some help, and you allow her to help her friend. And then at some point, things get a bit out of hand, and you realize that, well, she's actually given, her boyfriend has taken the card and is out spending all over the place, and all of her money's gone, and now your money's gone. So what do? You go immediately to where she is, you cut off the credit card, because you have to find out what's happened. Where did the money go? Where did the boyfriend go? Because you want to hold him responsible. And this is something similar that's happened. The American taxpayers work very, very hard for their money. And we pay a lot in taxes. And there are some things which we would be happy to help our friends and our neighbors with around the world. As you and I have discussed in the past, there's an American footprint in hospitals, in schools, and exchange programs, things that improve society. And I think most Americans very much support that. But we are a deficit nation, we're a debtor nation, and we're struggling. Not in the long term, just in the current term, because there have been austerity measures put in place so that we can understand exactly how generous we can continue to be, but at the same time restore our economic stability. And we've discovered, as is the case with USAID, that there is spending that is going on like that boyfriend. Someone has taken control over some of these programs and is using them for purposes that Americans didn't vote for and Americans don't support. And they were never given an opportunity to have a choice in this. What President Trump has done has completely reset the process. It's not necessarily going away forever, but what is happening is we're taking a few months, and I believe the government is looking into each of these programs and each of the ideas behind them and trying to decide which ones actually make sense for us and for our partners. And again, many of these were actually programs that were damaging the interests of the United States or the reputation of the United States. And
yes,
that's
but here,
not
for
helpful.
example, when you mention USAID in North Macedonia, but also in the region, it was an institution that really helped the people in a way, because it was helping in so many sectors. In that sense, sometimes maybe the feeling was that now US has shifted the attention, and then they will not be here anymore, present somehow. So this is not the case. That's what you're saying.
No, it is the case. I'm sure that many of the programs were very helpful. But let's just be blunt and look at it from a different perspective. It's nice to do those things, and it gives America influence and relationships that matter to us and are useful. But at the same time, there are things that are not being done for American citizens. Many things. When you have a government that is doing things abroad and not doing things at home, it creates instability. So for this short period of time, what we are doing, I believe in the United States government, is refocusing domestically. And there's a new approach. Instead of simply giving money to things, money that frankly we don't really have right now, it looks like there's a doctrine of mutual prosperity that is developing instead, where instead of us just handing you some money and saying, please go do something good with this, I said, let's do business together. Let's create an opportunity to each prosper from this. By that money coming back into your economy in a real sense, having been earned and having created a basis for growth, you have a very stable economic basis. What has been the impact with USAID pulling out on smaller nations around the world on their economies? In some cases, it's been a fairly significant hit. Why is that? Why was American taxpayer dollars the basis of these countries' certain economic sectors? That's not natural. It's not healthy for us or for them. So it is time to bring things to a natural state where each country involved is pursuing its own best national interest. That's the only basis for cooperation.
And in some people would say that, or describe it as a transactional politics. Is it right when they describe it like this?
I think all politics is transactional. I think what this is honest transactions.
So because it makes it honest,
It's transparent.
it should be more acceptance. That's the idea.
I think it's more useful. It's transparent. I mean, how often does someone come to you and say, here, I have money for you? And then you say, what do you want? Oh, nothing. That's never true. Let's talk about what we want. Let's put things on the table. Let's go forward as friends, as peers, respecting one another, being honest and transparent. Let's not meddle in other countries' affairs. Let's not pull the rug out from under people we don't like simply because we don't like them. let's be transparent and go forward as equals.
Is it the same logic when DOJ was established? Because for so many years, the idea was that probably the private sector, the powerful people should stay away from the government, or at least when they had a relationship, it should be really, or at least that was the idea, it should be very transparent through a very rigorous processes when they get some government money, and you know what I'm implying. And with DOJ,
yes.
we had this a new way, as you said, more transparent communication with someone who is very powerful, and the president's office, who also is very powerful. How can we explain to people abroad the DOJ, the Department of Government Efficiency, in Albanian Departamenti i Efikasitetit Qeveritar, in the way it works in America and in the way it's perceived here?
Well, again, I don't speak for anyone in any capacity. This is just my own personal assessment. But we do have a crisis, in the United States, and it's something that can't be allowed to fester. Every day it goes on, we're farther behind. So, and we have tremendous resources. One of the most effective resources we have are the people. And again, Elon Musk is one of the best businessmen in the world. He's one of the greatest minds in the world. Why would you not use him? The president is the executive of the country. It is the executive branch. He has the ability, because he's been elected and given a mandate, to make executive decisions to choose to execute certain policies. Within certain bounds, he can retain whomever he wishes to do this, and he's chosen the best in this case. They have done an amazing job. I mean, they've looked at what exists, and in a very business-like fashion, in a very real fashion, are making government responsive to American citizens again. But that's all within the power of the executive. It's not a permanent position. We have laws that restrict the amount of time these types of things can exist, and it's not unprecedented. Every president has had commissions, advisory commissions, that can empower them to do things. And then if you look at previous administrations, particularly the Biden administration and the Obama administration, they built some fairly significant corporate partnerships, particularly with big tech like Google and Facebook. Facebook was funding part of our election activities around the country. Is that more collusion, you might say, than this, which is simply cost cutting? I mean, we're looking at auditing and making recommendations and having some executive authority entrusted to them versus interfering in our elections. It's quite a big difference.
In this sense, then, do you think that the crisis that you mentioned was the factor or the crisis of the way the institutions were working were the factor why people voted President Trump? Why I'm asking this question is because a lot of people in Europe and abroad would say why an American would elect a president that it will shake up the system, that probably in the eyes of the people outside US, everything was working fine.
I have a very good answer for that, and it actually comes from Scotland. There's someone who's now a friend at this conference I was at. She's a Scottish representative was a Scottish member of Parliament, yet she is not ethnically Scottish. She comes from a Middle Eastern background, and is very, very, what we would say, liberal in the United States. She's a leftist. There aren't many things she and I agree on, but there are quite some powerful things we do agree on. And one thing she mentioned to me that she likes about President Trump is that he knows what a woman is. It seems fundamental because it is. That's one thing. Americans have been dealing with something very similar to what she's been dealing with her own children, where you're afraid to send your children to school because of what they might be taught or forced to do, or forced to acknowledge in a very communistic way, where they have to profess belief in something they don't actually believe, and it has to do with gender. It's these very basic things. So all of these things started to add up over time. I mean, that's just a very initial course where something that seems so natural is perverted, and then you keep adding these other things on there. You know, we had suppressed freedom of speech for a whole host of reasons. We have an immigration.
But when you talk about this, it's something that people here cannot believe so easily. Because America was viewed as a champion of freedom of speech.
It is one of the bases of our founding. This is what's so hard. So you have, and it's been very slow, all of these erosions of rights and abilities and so forth. But you put it on top of the immigration issue, which, you know, again, Americans are very, very caring people. We want to help others. But there's a capacity issue, and there's also a cultural dilution issue. You can't have order amongst chaos. And when you have all of a sudden too many people in your house, you can't keep control of your house. So, you know, you have to plan for these things. So it's been very, very clear for a long time, a very long time, since Ronald Reagan, that Americans do not want an open border. Yet every administration, more and more immigrants. And there's a problem with this, though. It's not just people coming into the country. Our system of representation is based not on the number of citizens in a district for our Congress. It's based on the number of people. So if we brought in the entire nation of Macedonia, and it's 2 million people, into my state, into Arkansas, we would double the size of Arkansas and also double our representation in Congress. Yet only half of these people, the original Arkansans, would be able to vote. That's a bit of a problem, but we feel like a lot of that has been weaponized or at least ignored. Even if it's not done intentionally, certain parties, political parties, entities are benefiting from this. So there's never been an effort to curtail it until President Trump. You realize he closed the border his first month in office. We've been promised for the last 20, 30 years, every administration, oh, we're going to do this. He did it in a month. So we were lied to, but the point is, I think people understood this. They knew what had to be done with all of these things. It was too much. We were fed up. We were losing money. Jobs were disappearing. Wages were less, costs were way up. I mean, the eggs, for some reason they killed all the chickens after the election. So our eggs they doubled in price in a month. And this hurts common people, the majority of the voters. They need someone who listens to them and who will take action, and that has been President Trump.
Okay, so this is in a way the view from America,
from the middle of the country.
Middle of the country, exactly. That probably it's not viewed very often here because of what international media is dominating the news, and mostly the criticism that comes towards the way the President Trump is running his office right now. Okay, we're gonna do a short break and then we will come back and talk a little bit about international affairs as well. How is viewed in America and how Europe and my country is perceiving, and in the end, the ties. There are countries in Europe that want to look more close to US. How is that probably seen? But after the break, do të bëjmë një shkëputje dhe rikthehemi me pjesën tjetër të intervistës. Na ndiqni. Jemi në studio përsëri. Henry Thomas Jones, ish drejtori i IRI-t për Evropën Qendrore dhe Lindore, është këtu në një bisedë interesante me mua. Rreth Amerikës, që ndoshta ne nuk e shohim, por si funksionon atje. So, Mr. Jones, we were talking a little bit about how the domestic politics is going on in America and why the issues that probably we see in a different way are the major issues in US. But also, when you wake up every morning, and I read international news a lot, and then in this particular time, almost every day the top news is America, White House, President Trump, with either what he has said or either what he plans to do, or maybe some action that US has taken and what kind of impact it had. So again, maybe the same question that I asked you about domestic politics. Do you think that we get the same perspective of what America is doing internationally like you see it from inside?
Oh, absolutely not.
So how can you explain that?
Yeah, let me ask a question though. We've discussed this, you and I, in the past a little bit, but So what's happening with the South African refugees in the United States? What do you see the media here telling you the story is?
I think it's, I mean, okay, you mentioned South Africa, and it was the latest...
the latest interesting
event, I'm choosing words, in Oval Office. But international media has interpreted it very differently, basically suggesting that some facts that the president has given, maybe they are not true. So, what do we not know then?
Well, there's a lot we don't know, okay? And it's unfortunate, and I'm using this as an illustration, which I believe,
exactly, yes.
I believe he did as well.
That's the idea.
So, as you may know, when he had the press conference with the South African president, he wheeled in a couple of video monitors and played some videos that illustrated the problem. There is I don't know how you can say this isn't fact. At the political rallies, they're calling for, they have a song called Kill the Boer. And then white people are being killed in South Africa. So in every other context, there would be a direct correlation. If you had KKK rallies in the United States saying, kill African Americans, and then there was a spate of murders, you'd say, well, that's the reason, and then you would want to do something about it.
Yes, but the report was saying that there are not confirmed cases, like a lot of international media that was saying. I was just reading that, saying that, if 1,000 farmers will go dead, it's not something that you can hide.
Let's not even worry about confirming, okay? But that's another issue. Who do you trust to confirm? Okay, because the families that have lost family members, they confirm it. Are they trustworthy? But let's not worry about that.
Okay.
Let's just talk about the atmosphere that creates. So it creates a situation, and again, Albanians should know this very well. It creates a situation where you feel unsafe in your own country. And the United States has offered to accept refugees, which we have accepted. What have you seen from these refugees? Other than the fact that they're white people, they're families. You see husbands, wives, and children. Now, the reason that this is distinctive is that when we see the other migrations from these problem areas, you think in a place, I'm a father, as I've mentioned, I have children, I have daughters and a wife, and I'm very traditional. I know what a woman is, and one of my jobs in life is to protect them. So if there is a war in my country, if there is famine, if there is any problem at all, if someone needs to leave and become a refugee, it would be my wife and children. I would stay, unless we could all go together for some reason. That's not what we see happening across Europe. It's not even what we see happening across our southern border. So what we have is an actual case of real refugees being given a refuge, and the media is rejecting this. Even our refugee organizations are rejecting this. So why is that? And I don't have answers, but it does tell you that something's wrong, doesn't it? And that's really what we're dealing with. So President Trump is ingenious in many of his methods. And again, the media, we talk about this as Gulf, where they're not carrying this information over here. That's the way he was able to get that here. Now you have that information simply because he used the bully pulpit of the White House to put the video monitors out and put that message out involuntarily. He knew the media would have to cover it. He was speaking through that situation to you.
Okay. I said there are different reports on how the interpretation of that event happened, but yes, we hear what you're saying.
It's the outcome that matters.
Okay, you mentioned South Africa, maybe because it was the latest, but of course here big news is war in Ukraine and what's going on in Palestine, and the way the administration is dealing also about these two major issues. So how is a typical American viewing these issues? Because as you can see from Europe, from the world, there is quite a criticism of how maybe United States should operate.
No, I understand that, and Ukraine has been very divisive on a number of levels, but that's an easier issue to discuss. Let's do that one first. Fundamentally, it comes down to responsibility. And there's a responsibility on the West to have approached the situation from a very long time ago. We're looking at prior to 2014, really, in a responsible fashion and in being an honest broker. And, we know Russia, we understand the Russian mindset. And, if you kick the bear, it bites back. And it's understood that if you poke things enough, you can cause a reaction. It's also understood that if you behave respectfully and politely, you can actually get a lot more done. As we say, you can get more done with honey than vinegar. So honey being sweet, vinegar being what we have had in the State Department, not now. So, but
now things are changed.
And so the issue is, Americans especially, but I think no one in the world votes for war unless there's no other choice. What's happening and has happened in Ukraine is a tragedy. I'm not excusing the Russian invasion. That's a whole separate set of circumstances, but it seemed that there was an opportunity at the very outset to, first of all, prevent that immediate invasion and then to go to peace very quickly. And for whatever reason, Western nations advising Ukraine to reject that notion have led us to where we are today. So you have to reset that relationship. And since we are the primary benefactors of the war machine in Ukraine, by pulling back that funding, you're forcing people to the table. But the important thing, it isn't anything more than the deaths each day. Men are fighting who really should not be fighting. People are suffering. Facilities are destroyed. Generations of children are losing opportunities. And it doesn't have to be this way.
But when you say all this, especially in Europe and European Union and leaders of Europe, they say that some ties with the traditional allies have been broken because of the way this administration deals with this issue. Do you agree with that? Is this message seen in America by ordinary Americans? Do they understand this, and vice versa? Do the people here, do you think that understand the way President Trump is doing? Is dealing with this particular issue in the way he deals?
I think right now, again, because of some of the issues we have discussed, there is not understanding here of the U.S. and to some extent vice versa. But on the U.S. side, I think people are very clear on again, talking about Ukraine right now especially, what has been done and what is going to be done. What we see with these ties that are strained, they're definitely strained. But it's because we are, as the United States, are choosing to do things differently. We're choosing to do things more responsive to our own citizens to start with, which is the job of every government. This is an American government. This is an American president. We have friends in the world, but sometimes your friends are not cooperating with you. It seems that throughout history, ending conflict has always been the prominent and most important priority. People differ about the means, but during the last year, at least, of Ukraine, there have been ample calls and reasons to end, and it's been accelerated by our allies. So we haven't been able to come to common ground on why we can't approach peace in a more direct, more immediate fashion. Now that we have President Trump, he has essentially decided to go forward with his own capabilities, and rightfully so, to put a stop to this. Well, it's disturbing that our allies don't support this.
I'm going to get back to about the allies and Europe especially, but another matter internationally is Palestine and what's going on right there. And again, we heard from President Trump different ideas that probably were not accepted, at least. And of course, the reaction that also some of them were not considered, let's say, very helpful, if I may use that word. So how do you see this issue in the sense, and when we see what's going on right now, it's tremendous human tragedy.
Palestine is a tragedy of proportion that I think we don't know enough about in the United States. And this is actually another case where we can help each other. Albanians have a very good relationship with America. And we also need our friends to give us information that we're not always getting. The same media problems that you have here in receiving what's really happened in the United States, that same media sometimes filters, in some ways, what's happening in Palestine. Again, it's a problem. There are no winners in this conflict, but there are innocent losers. And we have to work together quickly to find a way to stop the killing. And there has been a lot of propaganda in the United States for many years that tend to push us in one single direction. And Americans don't want war, we don't want killing, we don't want to fight anyone else's wars, and we don't want to start a war with Iran. And you've seen there's been a little bit of daylight emerging between the administration and Israel, first time in a long time. And that is because of different approaches towards both Iran and Gaza. And I also believe it's because there's been perhaps a misunderstanding in both capitals about the type of collaboration that was expected. And I also think that perhaps it is President Trump's message to back off a little bit to Jerusalem. But
can we see the latest visit of the President Trump in Middle East and in Arab world, basically as a message?
Absolutely.
As you
this
explained?
Is long overdue, and you know, we need to be, again, America first, but also world first, and just in the sense that we have friends and we shouldn't limit our opportunities to engage in mutual prosperity, to engage in dialogue, to build our universe of opportunities. And I think this is President Trump's signal, and let me just put it in it's a cliche, but we're open for business. In other words, let's all talk. When you limit your opportunity to find solutions, problems stagnate. And doing things the old ways has led us to where we are. We need to have new conversations, bring in new ideas, and create new channels of communication. And then, again, with Gaza, maybe we can see things a bit more clearly, and maybe we can see a solution together. But what has gone before can't continue, or we all lose.
Another issue, and you mentioned a little bit before, a little bit disappointment comes from US, and we are right to understand that, yes, when it comes to European allies. But the tariffs and everything about that created that tension, let's say. And some critics are saying maybe this reaction from United States, it may be united Europe somehow. The others are saying that it shouldn't have happened because Europe is nothing with United States. How do you see this issue, or what's the narrative in the United States about this issue?
And again, I want to remind you, I don't speak for anyone. This is just my own personal analysis.
We made that clear, but we have the opportunity.
Well, you know me.
A person who knows a lot of stuff, who knows the region, who knows politics, who has been involved in so many dealings in America, to give a perspective from Middle America.
Yeah. Well, do you know? And I didn't know this. None of us knew this until President Trump engaged with tariffs. Every country in the world has tariffs on us. But we don't. It was just unilateral. So, you know, that's an interesting factor, especially since, you know, our manufacturing is gone. You know, we've lost an ability. I mean, and I think this is very important for small nations as well as large nations. You have to maintain some measure of self-sufficiency regardless. And that's something President Rugova knew. He was focused on that. And when you can't manufacture your own goods, when you can't manufacture your own weapons of defense, you're not self-sufficient. So part of President Trump's plan appears to be creating a circumstance where we can reinvigorate our manufacturing, and it's working. We're having American manufacturers and foreign manufacturers moving their factories to the United States now. It's having the effect. Because remember, he is the American president first, and his responsibility is to restore prosperity. The jobs that went with those factories, good, high-paying jobs that don't require a high level of education, were gone with them. And our people suffer as a result. So this is all coming back, and it's rebuilding this base of the middle class, which the middle class is what's necessary to have a functional representative democracy. Otherwise, you have some sort of oligarchy or, you know, a tyranny. But the other aspect of the tariffs, they're a call to negotiation. Again, we all know Trump is you know, the master deal maker. I mean, he wrote a book about it, and I hope it's been read by our partners, because I think that's a useful manual into engaging. But there's always an opportunity to renegotiate. And with Macedonia especially, you know, Macedonia is we don't have a lot of trade, but it might be a symbolic gesture if they were able to get a different tariff out of the relationship by engaging on that in certain aspects. There's some things Macedonia has that the United States is looking to bring to its people, like alkaloid, for example. We have a very good pharmaceutical manufacturer here that produces them very cheaply. That's something we need. I think they should have a dialogue about that. But that being said, the tariffs aren't permanent. And as you've seen, they've kind of been moved around a little bit. The China situation, not permanent. It could be, but it's an opportunity to negotiate, to trade, to dialogue.
So basically, it's a way to negotiate. It's a tool to negotiate.
It can be. And if there's no negotiation, then it's a way of protecting what we have at home and rebuilding our economy.
Because we don't have a lot of time.
Right,
and of course,
right.
the questions are there. But in the last part of this interview, of this conversation, what I want to ask you directly is: are the people right to think that U.S., because of President Trump, it's not going to be present in Europe and in the world as before?
Yes and no. I think as before, the answer to that is yes. But will we be present? Yes, perhaps more than ever. But it's a different perception. Again, we're going back to what our aid looked like and how it was utilized. And that was a presence that, God willing, is never coming back. Because major portions of that were not constructive, either for my country or yours. But the humanitarian efforts, the building of our presence, like in an aid component, I don't see that going away forever. But in terms of presence, I expect we'll have a robust presence. But it will be more of business relationships, interpersonal exchanges, building coalitions to advance certain world causes that are necessary and needed. Again, I think even with Ukraine, you're seeing a foundation being laid for peace, but you're going to have international support for that end product. Right now, I think it's getting the framework put in, but you will always see Americans reaching out to their friends, their allies, and even their enemies, trying to build coalitions to advance, good, and of course to advance our own interests.
For a lot of countries, especially small countries, the idea is that without the support of United States, they will have a lot of challenges. Do you think that the President Trump administration will change this?
Yes.
How?
Congo. You're familiar with their child labor situation in the mines, and it's horrendous. I mean, it really is horrendous, and it's the West that supports this. Everything that's pulled out of the earth there and sold to the West is done through absolutely inhumane, horrific circumstances. And in a just world, that would not be allowed. But there is an effort both within the Congo and on the outside to make things better. And of course, the minute President Trump assumed office, the leader of the Congo went straight to Washington and said, I'll tell you what, I know you want what we have in the ground, but I don't like the relationship the way it's been. You help us fix this situation, the logistics, the extraction, the labor, and we will give you first, rights to all of the minerals.
But what about in the region? Do you think that the countries of the region with President Trump will somehow lose the support that United States was giving them?
It depends on what you mean by support. In terms of moral support, friendship, alliance, even military protection in times of crisis, no. But in terms of funneling money to NGOs that undermine the structure of society, yes. But that's not really support, is it? But I think you're going to see, again, a more robust presence in terms of our side empowering our businesses to do business here, and also creating channels for you to do business in the United States. And in some ways, that's the best form of diplomacy, because again, it's mutual prosperity. So you have a rising on both sides, and that's so much better than a lecturing from the United States about what you are or aren't doing properly. And it's your responsibility to fix your country. We can help, but we can't and shouldn't do that. But it helps to have people that are prosperous trying to make changes, and that's what I think we can deliver.
And as we established in this conversation, not necessarily in Europe and in a lot of countries, people understand or accept how President Trump is running his office. But nevertheless, there are countries that are allies, that they try to see President Trump as a model. There also are countries that, including North Macedonia, that want to cross the message that they are very pro-American, pro-Trump in that case, or very supportive of how a president is doing his presidency. How are in United States these countries viewed or seen? when they try to say that we are more supportive.
Which audiences are you talking about? Again, in just general America, we don't get this information. Because first of all, anything that is positive about President Trump from this part of the world or anywhere else generally isn't carried by our media, so we'll never know. We have no idea because it doesn't come to us. But for those of us that do have a little information and do know, we're of course very happy about it. But in terms of actual impact, it doesn't matter so much. I think, honestly, we want to be friends, we want to be allies, and we're very happy to have people that openly support the president. But we also are very happy to have friends and allies who are taking very good care to do what's best for their own countries. And, in terms of ensuring that they don't neglect other relationships, other alliances, it's good when we're all strong and all growing together. It's not good to become loyalists to one thing or another over time. You have to have stable societies, just as friends, that cooperate and help each other. And
so basically,
that's more important.
The message is that the United States will be here in this region, but not in the way probably we were used to see it before.
I would like to say in a better, more honest, and more assistive capacity, in the sense that we are assisting one another to grow together.
Henry Thomas Jones, thank you very much for this interesting interview and the possibility to understand more how America is thinking today, or maybe how a Republican from a generation of President Trump is thinking today. So thank you very much.
Mr. Rashidi, it's been my honor to be interviewed by you. Thank you for your time today.
Të dashur teleshikues, ishte kjo intervista me Henry Thomas Jones, ish drejtori i IRI-t për Evropën Qendrore dhe Lindore, njohësi mirë i politikës ndër vite këtu, por sigurisht edhe asaj ndërkombëtare, dhe një mundësi e rrallë për të parë se si mendojnë dhe çfarë debatesh dhe narrativash ekzistojnë në shoqërinë amerikane që ndoshta ne këtu nuk e shohim shpesh. Programi 200 do vi sërish javën që vjen, deri atëherë, mirupafshim.